Hello and welcome everyone to this webinar on same-sex marriage and beyond. मेरा नाम मनु मौडगिल है and I'm representing Queering in चंडीगढ़ and Queer लिफाफा। ये दो ग्रुप्स हैं जो चंडीगढ़ में पिछले 1 साल में ही बने हैं और हमने कुछ ही महीनों में मीटअप्स, लिसनिंग सपोर्ट सर्कल्स और जेंडर सेंसिटाइजेशन वर्कशॉप्स ऑर्गेनाइज़ की हैं। इसके अलावा जो 2 महीने पहले यहाँ पर चंडीगढ़ प्राइड वीक हुआ उसमें भी हम को-ऑर्गेनाइजर्स थे। So if you are living in or around Chandigarh, you are welcome to join the groups, especially if you are queer. Also, we welcome the allies जो हमारे queer rights का समर्थन करते हैं. They are also welcome to join the groups. So we have an expert panel with us today. I will just introduce the panel. We have Sharif D Rangnekar, who is an author. इन्होंने 2 किताबें लिखी हैं, क्वेयर सेपियन एंड स्टेट टू नॉर्मल। कभी भी वक्त मिले आपको तो ज़रूर पढ़िएगा। इसके अलावा शारिफ हैज़ over 30 years of experience in the field of journalism, research, PR and image management. He is also the director of Rainbow Lit Fest, has been a TEDx speaker, and what I love about Sharif is that he queers the pitch in whichever field he enters, whether it's being a singer-songwriter, whether it's being a TEDx speaker, whether it's being into public relations or journalism or research. So welcome Sharif, thanks for joining us today. हमारे नेक्स्ट स्पीकर हैं ऋतुपर्णा बोरा। ऋतुपर्णा is an indigenous disabled queer feminist with over 15 years of experience on gender, sexuality and LGBTQIA plus issues. She is the co-director of Nazariya. Nazariya हम में से काफ़ी लोग जानते हैं. We are inspired by the work of Nazariya. It's a queer feminist resource group based in Delhi, and it's queer run and led organization. Its mission is to make queer lives visible. Rituparna has also filed a petition in the Supreme Court on marriage equality and chosen families. उसके बारे में हम ऋतुपर्णा से आगे बात करेंगे. Our next other speaker is Dr. Saptarshi Mandal, जो कि एसोसिएट प्रोफेसर है जिंदल ग्लोबल लॉ स्कूल में, which is part of OP जिंदल ग्लोबल यूनिवर्सिटी. सप्तऋषि ने पहले काम किया है लॉयर्स कलेक्टिव के साथ, मार्ग के साथ, और कंसल्टेंट रहे हैं इंटरनेशनल ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस जैसे एमनेस्टी इंटरनेशनल और क्रिया. इसके अलावा सप्तऋषि का काम जो एक एनालिसिस रहा है राइट टू प्राइवेसी के बारे में नास फाउंडेशन के केस में, वो सुप्रीम कोर्ट ने साइट किया अपनी जजमेंट में, जो उनकी सेक्शन 377 की जजमेंट थी उसमें. तो वेलकम सप्तऋषि, थैंक्स फॉर टेकिंग आउट टाइम, ऑल थ्री ऑफ यू, फॉर हैविंग दिस कन्वर्सेशन. Arif, I want to start with you. You have written these 2 books, Queer Sapien and State to Normal. And both these books are autobiographical. You talk a lot about your life as a gay man. And this need to have a companion, to settle down with someone. How do you think, having a legal recognition to that partnership will help? What are the benefits that a couple gets from being legally married?
So Manu, thanks for having me. Yeah, well, actually, I think in both the books, in a way, I've talked about love. I have not necessarily talked about having one person necessarily as a partner. And in fact, I think in both the books, I do talk about queering the idea of relationships too. May not be at that length. But yeah, I do believe that, the law can provide all kinds of protection to an individual to start with, So I don't want to. My argument has always been that while we debate and discuss same-sex marriage and things like that, and they are important to certain people, and they're important because of certain civil rights that exist within those acts. I don't think marriage in the way the word is used, in the way it is interpreted, in the way it's argued also by religious groups, is really of that much importance as much as when compared with the civil rights. So I believe uh, that when it comes to people like us, the issues of discrimination more than, and the various civil rights that we sort of need. Today when we are all talking about same-sex marriage, and good you added the word beyond, we forget, or we tend to forget, because we're so impacted by mainstream ideas and the way things are thrown at us, that we forget the quantum of discrimination that takes place in a home. And I think one of the things that Rituparna and the others who have filed this petition is also talking about familial violence in a home. We're talking about inheritance and disinheritance. We're talking about kids that don't get the same attention when they're being bullied in schools because they're queer. That even their parents ignore that. We have large, well-known institutions. Even after 377 was read down, that like at IIT, like at the Delhi Public School in Faridabad, which was last year, and these are the known cases, right? They don't get the attention. There is a tendency not to get the attention of the press or other forms of influence that address this sort of discrimination that takes place. There aren't safe spaces sufficiently out there for someone to start even trying to love themselves, forget finding a partner and all of that. I believe marriage and all, you also need economic security. So you need workplace to be addressed. You need just so many other things to feel safe, or to give yourself fully, in terms of intimate love, whether it's one partner, two partners, three partners, whichever way you want to look at it. So I feel, and I think that I've tried to address in certain ways when it comes to, particularly in the case of Queer Sapient in the last book, about the various forms of discrimination that exist, and who decides and who writes what inclusion is, and who decides what should be our priorities, and I think I wrote a piece in Scroll in maybe 2018, no, 19 summer or 20 summer, where I said we'd sort of given up the narrative to a very certain section of the community, as well as a certain section of mainstream press, where everything was being decided by, or the idea of what is queer was being determined, and what we need, by Cosmopolitan and Vogue and Times of India and the rest of it. It wasn't us, in terms of a very inclusive way. So I really feel that to me, safety, security, anti-bullying, anti-discrimination, certain rights at home, healthcare, housing. There's just so many things out there that we seem to ignore, which are part and parcel of anyone's life. So I think that's what I would really, I say that's what needs, I've addressed in different ways. But yeah, love at the end of it is, to start with yourself and then with someone else.
Yeah, right. And Rituparna, if you can talk about your petition, because you are talking about marriage equality, but also about chosen family. So what are you seeking from the court, if you can talk about that?
Okay, so I'll start with my own understanding of marriage. So I really believed, and I forgot who said that, maybe Emma Goldman, that just because you decide to sleep on the same bed with the person of the same gender, you do not need the state's approval for your rights. And I really did believe in it, and I still do believe in it. And as a Marxist feminist, I do believe that marriage is a patriarchal institution. It is an institution to control women's, especially women's agency. And when the marriage petition came up, and actually when 377 was decriminalized, that's when many of the political organizing and queer organizing, and I'm not using the word queer movement, started talking about अब यूएस में तो मैरिज इक्वलिटी है, एंड दे से गे मैरिज, दे डोंट यूज द वर्ड मैरिज इक्वलिटी, गे मैरिज है तो हम भी यहाँ पे गे मैरिज करते हैं. We were not at all keen, and this petition is not on behalf of Nazaria. This petition is behalf of a network which we started in, I think, 2008, and it's a very loose network of lesbian, bisexual, queer and intersex women and transmasculine persons. We started this network because many of the organizations and individuals which were working on familial violence and with LGBT population realized that it is important that we meet and talk about these issues, because हमारे issues बहुत similar होते थे because of being assigned a certain gender at birth. वो भी एक इश्यू था, और फैमिलियल वायलेंस, चाहे वो करेक्टिव रेप हो, चाहे वो कन्वर्जन थेरेपी हो, अब बहुत सारे फोर्स मैरिजेस हो, बहुत सारे इश्यूज आ रहे थे. तो 2008 बैंगलोर में हमने पहला मीटिंग किया था. तो हम, और जब ये मैरिज पिटिशंस आने लगे तब हमने बहुत दिनों तक कुछ नहीं किया. बट देन वी रियलाइज दैट द मैरिज पिटिशन जिसके अंदर वो तहत वो आ रहे थे, स्पेशल मैरिज एक्ट, उसमें ही इश्यूज है. बिकॉज एज ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस वी डू नॉट वर्क इन साइलोज, वी वर्क विद इंटरफेथ एंड इंटरकास्ट ऑर्गेनाइजेशन. एक ऐसा ऑर्गेनाइजेशन जिसके साथ हम काम करते हैं वो है धनक, जो इंटरफेथ इंटरकास्ट ऑर्गेनाइजेशन लोगों के साथ काम करते हैं. और उनके चीजों से हमने ये सीखा है कि इंटरफेथ इंटरकास्ट, उसमें भी स्पेशल मैरिज एक्ट का जो प्रोविजंस है, फॉर इंस्टेंस 30-day नोटिस पीरियड, या डोमिसाइल का इशू है. इफ यू माइग्रेट फ्रॉम वन प्लेस टू द अदर, फॉर एग्जांपल बहुत सारे लोग माइग्रेट होके दिल्ली में आते हैं, और अगर आपको दिल्ली में 30 days का आपको डोमिसाइल होना होगा, तभी तभी आप रजिस्टर कर पाएंगे दिल्ली में. प्लस ये जो आप 30-day नोटिस देते हो, 30-day नोटिस में आप ऐसे डीएम के ऑफिस में आपका फोटो चिपकाया जाएगा और आपका नाम लिखा जाएगा, आधार कार्ड पे जो एड्रेस होगा वो लिखा जाएगा, किसी को कोई ऑब्जेक्शन है तो बताओ. और इसीलिए बहुत सारे लोग हिंदू मैरिज एक्ट या आर्य समाज मंदिर में जाके शादी करते, क्योंकि वो एक घंटे में हो जाती है शादी. तो ये एक इश्यू था जिसको हमें लगा कि एक तो ये करना चाहिए. दूसरा, हमने देखा कि जितने भी पिटिशंस आ रहे थे वो बहुत एक हेटेरोनॉर्मेटिव फ्रेमवर्क से आ रहे थे कि हमको साथ रहना है, और वो जो विश्वास करते थे एज क्वेयर फेमिनिस्ट की मैरिज है, बहुत लोग एक चॉइस होनी चाहिए, लेकिन वो बहुत एक ऐसा लग रहा था कि हम एक हेटेरोसेक्सुअल फ्रेमवर्क से निकाल के क्वेयर फ्रेमवर्क में डाल रहे, और वो सिमिलर नैरेटिव, हमको साथ जिंदा रहना है, फॉरएवर लव चाहिए, हमको ये चाहिए वो चाहिए ना. तो हमको बहुत घबराहट हो रही थी. प्लस वो सारे जो पिटिशंस थे वो अपर क्लास गे मैन के थे, जिनको सोसाइटी में मम्मी पापा के सपोर्ट थे, फैमिली के सपोर्ट थे, और उनको बस एक लीगल सपोर्ट चाहिए था कि बस मुझे ये प्रॉपर्टी, मेरा जो इतना सारा प्रॉपर्टी है, मुझे इसको अपने पार्टनर को देके जाना है. हम जितने भी एलबीटी नेटवर्क थे, हमारा था कि एक्चुअली ऐसा रियल में नहीं होता है, वायलेंस बहुत ज्यादा है, और स्पेशली विथ क्वेयर वुमन और ट्रांसमैस्कुलिन पीपल ये होता है कि हमारे रिलेशन को और सेक्सुअल एक्ट को सेक्स नहीं माना जाता है ना. तो even if you have stayed with a woman, and I'm using the word woman quote unquote, for like some days, it's okay, you just take her away and then you get her married off, because that's okay. आपने वो किया, आपका सेक्स नहीं हुआ है, ठीक है, आपको ठीक कर देंगे, और जितने भी, और कोई एक्सेप्टेंस नहीं है. और हमारा ये कहना था कि शादी हो या ना हो, आप बस आउट हो, कि आप क्वेयर हो या ट्रांस हो. ट्रांस होने के लिए आउट होना भी नहीं पड़ता है कई बार, बिकॉज पेरेंट्स नो, फैमिली नो कि आपको वायलेंस होता है, और ये रियलिटी है. मतलब ये जो अपर क्लास गे पिटिशन है वो बिल्कुल अलग है हमारे लिव रियलिटी से. और वो 377 वाला जो पिटिशन था, हाँ, एक लेस्बियन कपल है, वो भी अलग है. वो लेस्बियन पिटिशन भी बहुत अपर क्लास है, और फैमिली एक्सेप्टेंस है. मतलब इस तरह से बाहर में आके बोल पाना कि हमारा पिटिशन है. हमारे जो 3 कपल्स है वो एनोनिमाइज्ड है, for a reason कि वो नहीं आ सकते हैं बाहर. तो हमको लगा कि no, we have to bring up our experiences of working in with LGBTI community and talk about this. Second हमारा जो था कि बहुत सारे लोग शादी नहीं करेंगे या नहीं करना चाहते हैं या सिंगल है, उनका क्या फिर? उनका राइट टू फॉर्म फैमिली नहीं है क्या? वो भी फैमिली वायलेंस फेस करते हैं. दे ऑल्सो फेस अ लॉट ऑफ फैमिली वायलेंस. व्हाट इफ ड्यूरिंग ए हेल्थ crisis, okay, and someone had to pull a plug? For instance, someone has to pull a plug, and I'll give you my example. I have no one in my family. My father, who was supportive of me, passed away last year, and my brother is a violent man and no support from him. So I have no one in the family. So now, so what if that decision to pull the plug automatically go to my brother? Because he will not think about my well-being. He'll only think about money, or he'll only think about other things. It should go to not only my intimate sexual partner, because she's been with me only for 3-4 years, but my friends, my chosen family, who has been with me for like 20 years now. And some of you might know of my friends who have been with me. Saptarshi, you know of Jaya, or some other people who have been with me. Sharif, you know of some people who have been with me for so many years that they are my lifelines. Yeah. They are people without whom I cannot actually live. And so they are people who will decide. They are people who support financially. Financially भी support होता है, just like a family would do, right? Yeah. So मैं कैसे उनको मेरे intimate sexual partner एक आ जाने के वजह से उनको मैं हटा दूं? This was our basic idea कि our chosen families who have supported us beyond our intimate partner relationship and beyond our biological family should also get the thing. और इसीलिए हमने ये petition किया, and our petition is different than what other petitions are. Plus जो शारिफ ने बोला familial violence, इसके तहत we also did a जन सुनवाई public hearing with some panelists, जिसका हम report लिख रहे हैं हमें. 32 people came and spoke about familial violence across India. I think only 2 or 3 people spoke about wanting to get married, but all of them spoke about how family is a violent structure. So the fact that we are trying to create the same familial structure by marriage is something that we need to question. And I'm sorry to start this thing with a very negative thing, Saptarshi, which you started off saying that it's a critical analysis. But this is what, and we were in a dilemma as to if we should file this petition or not. मैं हूँ मीनाक्षी सान्याल और मालविका उनको बोला जाता है, माया शर्मा और चयनिका शाह, 4 एक्टिविस्ट हमारे LGBTI नेटवर्क से, और 3 कपल्स है जो एनोनिमाइज्ड है, जिन्होंने ये पिटिशन फाइल किया है. और हमने मैरिज को भी लिए बोला है, जिनको मैरिज चाहिए वो करे, बट स्पेशल मैरिज एक्ट में ये प्रोविजंस हटना चाहिए, और जिनको नहीं करना है इनको चोजन फैमिली का राइट होना चाहिए. तो इस पर्सपेक्टिव से, इन क्वेयर पर्सपेक्टिव से हम आते हैं.
Yeah, I mean, that's of course definitely very insightful, because we mostly hear from like people from big cities or people who are upper class, upper caste gay men, and we don't really get to hear, or we don't make efforts to hear voices from smaller towns, villages, from where people escape their abusive families and they don't have anywhere to go. And that's where Nazariya and other organizations are working. And if in the audience, if you have not seen that, please go to the Nazariya's Instagram account and watch the press conference, which was streamed live on the hearing that was public hearing that was done. So there was a press conference done later about that.
Manu, can I just interject one point, because it's what Rituparna was saying. I think there's a sentence by one of the people who were on that panel, Kavita Krishnan, where she wrote in her book, and I quote her actually, where she says that the contradiction in Indian families is that Bandhan means both bond and bondage. And that perhaps explains so many problems when it comes to freedom, choice, and being an individual.
Yeah.
And when it comes to the to just to seek your own sort of levels of safety and seek your own sort of family of people. I mean, even family, we don't need to really use that word, but we use it, I guess, as a reference point.
Yes. Right.
So
And
I argue that blood is not thicker than water
yeah.
necessarily.
Yeah. I just want to ask a follow-up question to Rituparna, because in the petition you have also talked about how legal recognition to either marriage or chosen family will also reduce familial violence, harassment that comes from abusive families. So, if you can talk about that, how would legal recognition help reduce the violence?
So it's not, see, for instance, it's not about reducing violence, it's about getting protection. So now what happens in metropolitan cities, for example, Bombay, in Delhi, been able to get some protection orders, but it's very random. Ki whenever parents file a case of, whenever parents violate a couple or a child or something, we go to the court or we get to the nearest police station, get protection orders, but वो बहुत random है. Abhi in Calcutta on 26th of March, a woman activist was kidnapped, and I'm using the word kidnapped, by police and by family members and kept in an unregistered mental health institution without her consent. But because there was Sappho for Equality, which is an organization based in Calcutta, and other activists who just rounded up the police station, and she and her own will, she could come out of that police. And she's someone who is educated, an activist herself. So I'm saying that it won't decrease the violence, but it will protect. So if there is a Supreme Court judgment which says that if a couple is asking for protection and right to form a family, that thing will be given to all, that direction will be given to all the police station and all the courts, and then that direction can be used in all over India and can be used all over Indian police. क्योंकि आप वो जन सुनवाई का जो भी आप टेस्टिमोनी सुनोगे, एंड हमारे इंस्टेंस में भी पुलिस, कोर्ट, ये सारे इंस्टीट्यूशन मिलके बहुत वायलेंस करते हैं फैमिली के साथ मिलके. तो अगर हमारे पास ये जजमेंट हो जाएगा कि पीपल हैव द राइट टू चूज फैमिलीज, बिकॉज क्या होता है कि कई बार जैसे पुलिस स्टेशन में आप होते हो ना, तो फैमिली को अंदर आने देते हैं, बाहर के लोगों को वो अंदर नहीं आने देते हैं. तो बोलते हैं कि, और वो फैमिली से ही लड़ाई कर रही है, वो और फैमिली के अगेंस्ट ही लड़ाई कर रही है. वो बोले कि नहीं फैमिली का मसला है, हम फैमिली को आने देंगे. हम एज एक्टिविस्ट को भी हमको लड़ाई करके जाना पड़ता है कि नहीं हम जाएंगे. तो इवन इन दैट मीडिएशन सेंटर इन द पुलिस स्टेशन, जो एक छोटा सा कमरा होता है, वहां पे भी नहीं अलाउ होता. अगर आपको रिकॉग्निशन है कि आप द राइट टू चूज अ फैमिली, एटलीस्ट दोज पीपल विल बी अलाउड टू एंटर द स्पेस एंड से कि हम भी फैमिली है. So you also get safety and security, a blanket, safety blanket, where you will be with your chosen family and be safe. Because अब जब फैमिली आते हैं ना, वो बहुत 20 लोग लेके आते हैं, है ना, और वो औरत या वो जो पर्सन है वो एक दो जना के साथ ही जा पाते हैं, बाकी लोग कोई अलाउड नहीं होते हैं. और जिस तरह का पुलिस स्टेशन या कोर्ट बहुत
I mean, thanks for explaining that, because I think this is definitely important petition as compared to other petitions which are very similar and just talk about marriage. Saptarshi, I want to get you in here, talking about, like, for instance, sometime back, this group of retired judges wrote a letter saying that, ये जो मुद्दा है ये कोर्ट को डिसाइड नहीं करना चाहिए, पार्लियामेंट या लेजिस्लेटिव असेंबलीज शुड discuss this, and so that there's more, it's more like democratic in their terms. But if you can tell us how much power or limitations the court has to strike down discriminatory provisions or to reimagine marriage and family in this particular case?
All right. Um, Thank you, Manu, and thank you to the organizers, Queering in Chandigarh and Queer Lifafa, for inviting me here. Um, so there are two ways in which courts can change the laws, right? One is where the written laws are, the laws are written in a way which can be interpreted in a creative manner, right? So which is what happened in the 377 case. The problematic phrase in 377 was carnal intercourse against the order of nature. It's a very vague phrase. What is carnal intercourse? What is against the order of nature? We don't know, and the law also did not specify. So there, the court could play a role and creatively interpret, kind of reduce the scope of that phrase, that vague phrase, give more meaning to that vague phrase, right? So they excluded relationship, consensual sexual acts from the scope of that phrase. So court's power to change laws through interpretation depends on the wording which is used in that particular law. So that's one route, through interpretation. The second route is by striking down. So their court is not interested in creatively interpreting a law. The court just says that that this just goes against any fundamental right, and courts in our system, high courts and supreme courts in our system, have the power to declare certain laws to be unconstitutional, right? So there, the court is not trying to save a law and creatively reinterpret it, creatively interpret it. The court is just striking it down and asking the legislature to either make a new law or just, there'll be no laws on that particular issue, that kind of situation. All the petitions in this case are making this argument that, look, our laws can be read in a creative manner which is favorable to us, right? And the article that Manu was referring to, I kind of, in a very cynical law professor kind of fashion, I kind of pointed out that that's not possible. The language is such that you can't play around, so that's as far as creative reinterpretation is concerned. When it comes to striking down, logically speaking, the court should take that seriously, and court should be able to sort of strike down the laws because they are discriminatory, right? In reality, however, the Supreme Court particularly has been very cautious when about striking down laws, about holding family laws to be unconstitutional. There are very, very few cases where the Supreme Court has actually done that. There are examples of high courts doing that, right? So one high court that I can think of is the Kerala High Court. Christian personal law, right? When India became independent, Christian personal law was it was full of discriminatory provisions, which continued till 2001. Throughout the 90s, throughout the 80s and 90s, Kerala High Court was one court which was constantly striking down all these discriminatory provisions. So, for example, Christian divorce law had this provision that if a husband wanted to divorce the wife, he only had to prove that the wife had committed adultery or had committed cruelty or had left him or something like that. But if the wife wanted to divorce the husband, then she had to prove not just one charge, but multiple sort of charges, that the husband was guilty of cruelty plus adultery or cruelty plus leaving the wife or something like that. So this is clearly discriminatory, right? Kerala High Court did away with, sort of struck down those provisions. Then even more recently, there have been instances where there are certain technical provisions which the court found to be discriminatory, and they kind of did that. The Supreme Court, however, in its entire history, has been very cautious about striking down laws and holding them unconstitutional. Our personal laws are full of discriminatory provisions. There has been instances where people have gone to court and sort of file cases against those discriminatory provisions. The court has always said, look, this is not an area where we can intervene. This is for the parliament to address, right? So that has been the history. So we have reasons to be cautious about what the court will do. There's another reason. I think courts also work in a way that, and particularly the Supreme Court, it's not just constitutional law, there's also a bit of constitutional politics, right? Every institution wants to preserve its legitimacy. It wants to appear powerful, right? If the court says that such and such law is unconstitutional and strikes it down, that's not the end of the story, because the next day the parliament can pass a law and invalidate that judgment of the Supreme Court, right? So if the court fears that such a thing might happen, and such a thing basically it amounts to showing the court its place, right? No court, no judge is going to do that. No judge is going to do something that diminishes their status in our system, right? So a court, even a Justice Chandrachud who makes all the right noises, and he talks about diversity, he talks about LGBT rights. I have a feeling even he is conscious of this aspect of constitutional politics. He'll not give a judgment which is so radical that the parliament enacts a law invalidating that judgment, which diminishes the stature of the court. It shows to the public that, look, the court actually can't do anything, right? So there is that aspect as well. So such decisions are not, such judgments are not decided based purely on legal arguments or constitutional arguments. There is also a lot of politics involved. So as a law professor, as someone who's aware of that history, I'm cautious about what the court is going to say in this case, both for technical reasons and also, because of all these considerations. One suggestion has been that even if the court does not invalidate the laws, the court might say that, look, under Article 21 of our Constitution, Article 21 deals with life and liberty, right? Everyone has the right to choose their partners. Everyone has the right to marry. And the state must ensure that everyone has the right to marry. So the responsibility is on the state to ensure that such legal mechanisms exist for everyone, irrespective of their sexual orientation, to get married to a person of their choice, right? And they might end the matter there, that there is a fundamental right to marry. Now, it's your responsibility to make it a reality by enacting a law or changing the existing laws or something like that. So that will be like a face-saving mechanism for the court. The court will not appear toothless, right? But at the same time, the court will not have to do anything concrete and strike down the existing laws, because that is going to sort of unsettle a lot of things. We'll have to change all the laws probably, yeah, and not just in the area of family law, but in the area of, say, taxation, in labor law, everywhere. That is a possibility. It might not mean anything with the current government, but yeah, through that the court will save its face and at the same time do something.
Yeah. So we have these examples from Costa Rica and Taiwan where courts give a deadline to the government to form a law, to pass a law on same-sex marriage. So is it possible for the court here as well to give a deadline to the government to form a law?
Yeah, it's possible. So it has happened before. Say in the triple talaq judgment, which was given in 2017, I think, the court asked the government to enact a law within 6 months, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, 6 months or a year. But this is not a triple talaq issue. There, the considerations for the government to act so proactively was very different from here. Right? Okay. So it's possible, but I'm not sure if the government is going to act on such a suggestion.
Okay.
Right? In the government's response to the petitions, the government is saying that yes, there is a difference. We are creating this difference in our laws between heterosexuals and homosexuals. But that difference is a given, and that's state policy. End of the matter. Right? So they're saying it's a natural thing, and therefore it's a state policy, and that's it. It's our prerogative to decide what state policy is, and that's it. So, yeah.
Yeah. But right now, I mean, for instance, right now, and it looks like in future as well, as you are saying, there's a low possibility of having a law in our favor. But what are the alternatives we have right now? Is there a possibility of having a living will where we give rights to our partners or chosen family to decide about our lives, or we can?
Right. Yeah. So I've actually thought about this a lot, and so in case of people who want to get married, the argument is that we get to appoint our partners in our property documents. We get to sort of appoint them as the decision makers if we are not in a position to make our healthcare decisions and that kind of stuff. And I've been wondering as to why do we think that we do not have any control over those decisions? I mean, as individuals, we also have the right to make wills, right? And sort of nominate somebody as the successor of our property. Of course, these wills are challenged by family members in court. It happens a lot, but then that happens even in case of heterosexual people. So all kinds of wills are challenged, right? Every time an old person leaves behind their property to a person who's not their family members, the family members go to court and say that this old person was not in the right state of mind when they wrote that will, and therefore that will should be invalidated. It was the decision of a person who was not capable of making that decision. So wills get challenged all the time. So wills that get challenged in case of queer people, I mean, that's not an exceptional scenario. So why can't we use these means to assert our individual will? In case of healthcare decisions, you talked about living wills. Now, living wills is a very new idea, right? It became the law only in 2018 under the Mental Health Care Act, and we still don't know how living wills are being used. So that option exists in law for any person to appoint somebody who will take all the significant decisions on your behalf. But in the law itself, to kind of set aside whatever you've written in the living will, right? So we still have very limited understanding of how living wills are sort of functioning in practice, to what extent they are respected. But that option exists, and I'm genuinely curious as to um, how queer people are using these available options, these avenues, uh, for their benefit.
Yeah, yeah. Yes, we have been.
I want to add to
Sorry. Yeah.
Saptarshi.
Yeah, Rituparna, please. Yeah.
Ancestral property is something which is still a problem to give it to people who are not by marital or blood. If I'm not mistaken, you cannot
No.
will ancestral property to.
No, you can actually. In case of, so the idea of ancestral property makes sense only in case of Hindus, and post 2005, any Hindu can. So as a Hindu, technically as a Hindu, I can not only make a will with respect to my individual property, but also my stake in the ancestral property.
Right. Yeah, Rituparna, you want to add something?
No, I think one of the things that people spoke in the Jan Sunwai Saptarshi was not in terms of property, mostly, was in terms of losing the sense of community that they grew up in. So it's not so much in the terms of cities, but people who belong to indigenous and Dalit communities, they spoke about the fact that they had to leave the village community because of who they were, and the sense of losing out on that community and not being able to go back to the community. I don't know how law will solve that. That's beyond my understanding, and definitely not something that I deal with. But because the lawyers kept on asking about ancestral property and about property, they kept on saying that property kuch nahi hai. But I do not get to go back to my community as who I was. I do not get to go back to those places, those people who I grew up with, and that sense of community is totally lost. So when I'm saying community, it's not the LGBT community. It's a community that they were part of, and it's mostly relevant to Dalit indigenous communities, not people who grew up in towns and cities.
It's the cultural property that they're talking about. Cultural.
Right, but yeah, I agree with you, Rituparna. Law cannot do anything about it, number one. And my second response would be, I don't know, I'll probably appear a little harsh, but once you decide to live your life a certain way, of course you're going to, a lot of people will be unhappy, right? So then it's like, I want this also and I want that also. I want to live my life on my terms, and I also want the community to accept me. It just appears a little contradictory and bizarre to me. Right? So I don't know if I'm making sense.
Okay. Rituparna, do you want to add something or respond to what Saptarshi said there?
No, just the fact that I have a different notion about it, because the place I come from, people do break challenge norms all the time. We have people eloping all the time, and I come from a place where marriage is not important, right? Like there's a concept of bura biya, where people get married only when they have money. So eloping is a concept there in my small community and also there, and people have been challenging norms. It's only here I see that there is this loss of community, and I don't know the context of other people where they are coming from, but I can only speak of my personal thing. That challenging norm is something that I've seen from my childhood, that घर वाले थोड़ा दिन के लिए नाराज होते हैं, but it's not नाराज, इतना खराब violence नहीं होता है, और people don't get married. My own cousin got married at the age of 54. Actually, when his son wanted to get married, legal and social marriage both. So it is a norm that people challenge norm. But it's only in this case that you are not part of the community anymore. So we might have differently. We can talk about it later. But I'm just saying that different parts have different this thing.
Of course, yeah.
But there's a point, Manu, that Saptarshi made about living wills and wills itself. So I think it's someone you might know, Saptarshi, but he's left, or he's
He
fallen
might
off.
join back.
So there's Seema Mishra, who's one of my lawyers, actually, family lawyers, and she used to also be with Marg. So Seema, insisted I get a will made when I'm much younger. So I already have one, which was 2016. And the reason was essentially this. She said that if over 10% of cases in the courts are family disputes, and if there are people from our family, which I hope not, and I don't think so, object to me leaving something for someone, whoever that be, they can't argue that I wasn't in the right frame of mind. I was in my 70s or 80s and all of those things. So maybe that's also the reason why I wrote my memoirs much before than what most people write generally. But the other thing was also living wills, that I've been given that advice, and I'm working on that, and and essentially from the healthcare perspective at this point in time. The other thing, I've been talking to a couple of other lawyers who are actually working on some of these same-sex marriage cases, young lawyers, and we're waiting for a renewal of one of my life insurance policies to come up, and then test how the system actually really works, and then if required, move the IRDA first, and then if not after the IRDA, and if they don't respond, move the courts to let me have the right as to who is the beneficiary of my insurance policy, and vice versa in the case of my partner. So I strongly agree with Saptarshi's argument, because there are many ways to chip away at the law. As Rituparna and Amrita did, less advertised and less talked about. Case when it was the Indian bank, if I remember correctly, who allowed them to have a joint bank account. But that's not universal. And I think they managed to convince their manager, and the manager couldn't find an answer, and they persisted and they got it done. But how many of us will persist with banks that already have made announcements, but branches have not responded? We all know about Access, for example. So I mean, I strongly believe the greater liberation is in personal choice.
Yeah, but again, I mean, if I can just...
everything is not a bouquet, then it's like a buffet meal, which you're getting into unhealthy consumption, or it's like having popcorn with Coke and all that stuff and sitting in one place because it's like...
Yeah, but Sharif, I also want to point out that this living will and other things, legal instruments, is also accessible to only certain privileged people. It's not like if it becomes a law, you don't need a legal will. I mean, you don't even...
Yeah, that's true. That's true. No, I mean, listen, I think moving the courts on anything is a privilege. Accessing pretty much anything, even having a bank account, is a privilege. So because I mean, it's not like some government scheme where they opened a number of bank accounts and there wasn't a penny in them. I mean, that's obviously the case, but then we are talking about same-sex marriage, and we're talking about some of the petitions that already exist. So
which is why Rituparna's petition becomes Rituparna and other co-petitioners. Is so important because it voices the concerns of people who are not as privileged, and they come from remote areas. They have different experiences than someone from the city or someone. But Sharif, I also wanted to ask you about, I mean, marriage in India also comes with certain boundaries of caste, class, religion. Do you think if same-sex marriage is allowed by the court or by the parliament, uh, would that disrupt this system, or we get there are high chances of getting co-opted in that traditional system of these boundaries?
Listen, I think that's a tough one to say, Manu, because there's a conversation that Salim Kidmai and I would keep having,
Yeah.
and we kept recalling the days of social mobility, and that social mobility existed in our homes, and obviously we were privileged folks to have open homes where people could pop in and things like that. But the same case to Salim's place, just anyone and everyone who, no matter what their background was, no matter what their caste was. I mean, those were not even things that we necessarily, gave credence to. But I think that has changed, particularly in a city like Delhi, because how many can afford to go to certain places to party? How many can afford, uh, you know? So I think class and caste are so closely intertwined. I'm not so sure that that mobility will be reflected in marriages, same-sex marriages and homosexual marriages. I'm not too sure of that. You know, because when we see also some of the petitioners that are there, and I'm not trying to hang them, but I'm just saying is this: look at the petitioners and look at their backgrounds of where they met. What are the places they met? What access did they have to education? What homes and addresses do they have? What kind of parents they've also had, right? Now, so I have my doubts at this point in time, and I just hope one is proven wrong, that there would be greater intersections, and that we actually queer the whole idea of what relationships can be and those equations, because I mean, otherwise we fall into that 90% of people who are pretty much in the arranged. Some marriages are arranged by parents, and they might find love, lucky ones, and the others might just go through dharma and follow the roles they're supposed to play. And but otherwise, I'm you'll be just supporting exactly what is wrong in the system of how you make choice, But I'm worried also when we look at the heterosexual scene. There was a book by Vivan Marwa, which what millennials want, and it was pretty well researched. It was this stunning and shocking, and I just hope we can clear that that 80% of the young who were surveyed and in detail said that they would rather have their parents decide on the marriage, and they only interested in getting a secure job. And so they were interested in this manufactured idea of dreams, of economic, of evolution. I mean, of progression over evolution, and one idea of vikas and development. So there seem to be a large number of people like that. Now, if the queer population is part of such things, then you're not going to see that change. Then you're going to have again the family getting involved and deciding on who you live with, who you marry.
I mean, that's true, and we see that already on the dating apps, the kind of filters people use to they talk about that. We don't want.
No, but Manu, that's interesting, because some of my just a couple of my extended family, and they matter to me, but they don't matter to me. Who kept telling me that I'm going to struggle with my current partner because of the cultural differences. And one was language, but because he speaks Nepali and Hindi, and also he has a job which in Delhi society is not necessarily considered fancy, particularly if he's a chef in a kitchen and not the chef at a Marriott Hilton or one of those hotels. So, but so I can just imagine, and what would happen if family is given a full hand and a free hand at determining marriages in the queer world, and if children think that they're the ones who should be taking the call and, not themselves. So,
Yeah, true. But Rituparna, there is, I mean, I was just reading your petition, and there also you talk about, how the marriages would be reimagined, or the relationship would be reimagined, which may not be monogamous, or you know, or they don't follow a particular patriarchal setup. So, how do you think, like, if your petition is kind of, Supreme Court gives a favorable judgment on your petition, how do you see that happening? A new kind of system which recognizes non-monogamous relationships, or new kind of imaginations of partnerships, companionships.
So our petition is not only about non-monogamy. It's again about right to chosen family. I think there should be a difference. Of course, monogamy is again a patriarchal setup, which we say it is what. So it's what Marx and Engels talked about in the origins of the private property. That private property उन्हीं को जाता है जब मैं अपना private property मैं अपने खुद के खून को देके जाऊंगा या जाऊंगी, है ना? तो उससे से monogamy शुरू होता है, and therefore it is patriarchal, and therefore it is controlling a person's agency and sexuality. So it is not about. So our petition is actually saying that जितना भी diverse relationships है, चाहे वो intimate है, चाहे वो romantic है, चाहे वो non-intimate है, चाहे वो non-romantic है, intimate है, non-romantic है, non-sexual है, सबको right to form families होना चाहिए, जो actually जोगजगाटा principle में भी है, right to form families बोल के एक principle है. जो बोलता है कि actually some people, I am quite comfortable with a monogamous relationship, to be honest, and I have a monogamous partner. But I understand, I acknowledge the fact that it is the privileged position that I'm talking about. It is where it is patriarchal, and it is a stance that I have chosen to take. This and believing that it is patriarchal, and I also believe that my friends are very, very important. And they will be the one, along with my intimate sexual partner, who will decide on my everything. मतलब मेरा life, मेरा decision, सब कुछ. So non-monogamy कैसे होगा वो मुझे पता नहीं. जैसे ये living will की बात हो रही है वैसे ही होगा. Marriage की तरह होगा कि नहीं होगा वो मुझे नहीं पता कि इंडिया अभी ready है इंडिया अभी रेडी है पॉलीएमोरस रिलेशनशिप को एक्सेप्ट करने के लिए, क्योंकि जैसे सप्तर्षि बोल रहे हैं कि हो सकता है हमारे जस्टिस बहुत प्रोग्रेसिव है, लेकिन इतना भी प्रोग्रेसिव नहीं कि वो ऐसा एक जजमेंट देंगे जिसके वजह से वो तहस नहस हो जाएगा, क्योंकि क्वेयर पीपल कैन एक्चुअली destroy family structure. This is what I believe in. And queer people, जैसे बहुत लोग बोलते हैं ना, नहीं हम तो कुछ नहीं करेंगे, हम तो जैसे है वैसे है. नहीं यार, we are actually challenging family structure. We are destroying family structure. We are destroying everything. We are that thing जो हम पूरा चीज को structures को challenge कर रहे हैं. एक्चुअली इतना बड़ा चैलेंज करने के लिए लोग देंगे कि नहीं देंगे वो हमें पता नहीं. कैसे ले जाएंगे वो लिविंग विल के थ्रू से या जैसे नॉमिनेशन के थ्रू से होगा कि नहीं होगा वो हमको देखना पड़ेगा. जो एक चीज मैं बस बोलना चाहती हूँ, पुराने क्वेश्चन से शारिफ को आपने पूछा था कि इंटरसेक्शनैलिटी का जन सुनवाई में ना, जो जहाँ पे इंटरफेथ कपल्स की बात आती थी वहां पे वायलेंस बहुत ज्यादा था.
पर्सनली
बहुत ज्यादा था. इंटरफेथ हमारे जात की कोई लड़की नहीं मिली, मतलब ये हुआ है. तो द फैक्ट इज दैट आई डोंट नो कि ये कास्ट, मतलब ऐसा लग रहा है कि मेरी हम मैरिज आ जाएगा, सब कुछ हो जाएगा, लेकिन ये जो कास्ट क्लास एक ऐसा चीज है, इट्स एन एलिफेंट इन द रूम व्हिच वी डोंट टॉक अबाउट. who do we elephant in the room है जिसके बारे में कोई नहीं बात करता, हमारे queer circles में बहुत visibly दिखाई देता है. तो I think सब कुछ आ जाएगा, ये नहीं जाएगा. And this is what I'm telling you right now, sitting here, nahi jayega. Right. And we have activists actually claiming that we will have shadi.com for queer and trans people, asking for same caste and same religion people. We'll have baniyas ke liye baniya और मारवाड़ी के लिए मारवाड़ी और इसके लिए सब कुछ होगा हमारा. आप देखते रहना.
हो चुका है ऋतुपर्णा.
Saptarshi, I mean, we were just reading your article, and there you had mentioned that this verdict will have implications for the LGBTQIA plus community, but also for family law reform. So, can you talk about this reforms that you mentioned there? What is that?
Okay, so I just want to continue. I want to sort of continue some of the things that both Sharif and Rituparna have been talking about, and then I'll answer your question about what the larger significance of this case. So I think issues of caste and religion are going to be relevant. So if today an interfaith or intercaste heterosexual couple face difficulties in getting married under the Special Marriage Act, right? Then an intercaste or interfaith gay couple will also face the same difficulties under the Special Marriage Act, right? Notices will be put outside the DM's office. These RSS goons who sort of keep waiting there for these notices, they'll note down the addresses, call up the parents, and they'll go through the same sort of cycles of harassment and everything. And so what this points at is that there is no so the queer issues are not separate from the general family law issues or the general legal system issues, right? They are interconnected, and you cannot sort of narrowly define an issue as an LGBT issue, right? So you cannot talk about the right to marry. I mean, you cannot possibly talk about same-sex marriage without talking about the problems that an interfaith couple faces or an intercaste couple faces, right? And so that's that's the point that I wanted to make. And I think one of the failures of the LGBT movement in India has been to exceptionalize, right? So this happened even during the decriminalization campaign, that police does marpeet with us. Police basically, we are the ones who face police torture, as if the Indian police does not sort of torture in general, or there is no culture of custodial torture in general, right? So then you kind of narrowly define your issue and you forget about the larger picture, the general picture, right? So that's one point that I wanted to make, just to kind of this thing. And so that's another reason why I think Rituparna's petition is so important. But here also, again, I just want to flag a negative, a cynical aspect. There was a petition in the Supreme Court filed by a straight woman, raising all these issues about the Special Marriage Act, how it's difficult for two mature adults to get married under the Special Marriage Act. Last year, the court dismissed that petition, saying that, so this woman had filed a public interest litigation. In a public interest litigation, you're basically saying that I am talking about an entire community. I am one person, but the issue that I'm raising, it affects the larger community. So the court, on a very technical, narrow sort of reasoning throughout the petition, saying that it's actually your issue, but you are dressing it up as a public issue, and therefore this is a bad this thing. Rituparna, I'm not sure she was from Dhanak. I don't think she was a member of an organization. I think she is a private citizen from Bangalore. Um, who, I mean, her parents did not have any problem. No one had any problem. She and her partner, they just wanted to get married under the Special Marriage Act because they wanted a secular marriage. But even that was so difficult. They had to sort of run from pillar to post and get permissions from different people. So that's where the court, that's the history of the court, right? So I do hope that since the bench is different and Justice Chandrachud is a relatively progressive judge on these matters, so I hope that there is a different response from the court to this petition. Okay, now to the question that you asked about the larger significance of this case. So I partly touched upon the answer, partly touched upon this question earlier. I said that the court has generally been reluctant to strike down discriminatory provisions in family law, right?
Yeah.
This is a 5-judge bench with big names, progressive judges who are aware of their audience. They know that the world is looking at them. They might chart a different course, right? They might be willing to examine the constitutional validity of discriminatory provisions, and then that might be used later to challenge other discriminatory provisions that exist in our family laws. Right? So, for example, even today, in case of Hindus, in case of Hindu parents, the father has a higher position than the mother, right? And this has existed since the 1950s. There have been cases challenging this. The court has basically skirted around the issue, right? Still today, that discriminatory provision kind of remains in the law. So if in the same-sex marriage case, the court sort of basically that's what I meant, that there are those possibilities.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So what we will do now is, since we have just 15-20 minutes left, we will take the audience questions. If there are any, Harshit, have you sent me the questions? Okay. Yeah. So so there was one question that asks that while bringing the conversation on same-sex marriage, the topic of divorce is also necessary. And it's not really a question, it's just, I guess, a comment that we also need to talk about how to part ways, I guess, legally. But of course, I mean, that will be only when we get allowed to be married. Then only we will be able to, there's a question, a generic question about, is government or court more powerful when it comes to law? By Aman. Aman has asked this.
So it's difficult to say with certainty. I would say it's more a matter of politics than law, right? There have been cases where the court has given a verdict on a particular issue and the government has not done anything about it. But there have been cases where the court has given a particular judgment and the government has not liked that judgment and the government has passed another law invalidating that judgment, right? And then there have been cases where the court has been silent, but then it has gradually kind of, it has undone what the government has done. So that kind of tussle goes on endlessly, and we cannot say for sure as to who is superior. I mean, the question of which institution is superior is very contextual, is very context specific.
Rituparna, there's a question for you. You might have seen it in the chat box by Vinamra, who is a queer Assamese kid, and he's asking you about your experience growing up queer in Assam.
um, I don't know. I grew up. I started in a convent school, and I'm very old. I'm 42. Growing up in a very small village in a convent school, and I had to travel like very far to go to that school. And in the school, the sisters, the nuns, and it was a co-ed school. The nuns used to say कि लड़कियों के साथ पास मत बैठ, मतलब don't be close to girls and don't touch girls. And I was like really surprised at why sisters ऐसे बोलते थे हमें, लड़कों के पास तो मत बैठो ठीक है, but no, लड़कों के पास बैठने के लिए मना करते थे, वो समझ में आता था, लड़कियों के पास क्यों बैठने के लिए मना करते थे. Plus, I was also very tomboyish, by the way, and it's only in graduation second year that I started dressing up as a woman. Before that, I was very, very masculine of center, and I thought of myself as a boy to a large extent. And even I have a card when I came to Delhi for my graduation that only boy in Miranda House bolke. But growing up in Assam, I think at the time there was no such discourse. I think when I was studying in Cotton College in Guwahati, I came to, for my 11, 12, I came to a hostel. there were discussions around कि lesbos है और lesbos ऐसे होते हैं, and I was very worried कि I didn't know my desire at that point of time. It was very difficult to decipher that कि मुझे ऐसे feelings है, but I was obviously realized later on that I was attracted to a few of the girls, but I didn't know what was that. Growing up queer, see, we have Bhavna in Assam, and as if you know, which is a skit, which is a play that people play, a religious, spiritual play, where men act as women, and many of the men who act as women are very feminine in nature. They do behave in a very feminine way, and I have many people in my family, many relatives in my family who are very, very feminine. Their marriage were never successful, and then there was a lot of acceptance of those people during those days when I was growing up. So it was a difficult. I have no such. I can't explain how was it growing up as square as a child there. It's crazy. I don't know.
Yeah.
I just want to talk about that divorce wala thing is that see, divorce in India is difficult, and as heterosexual people, divorce in India is very, very difficult. You have a long period of divorce, and as the collective, and when I'm part of the community, we tried to do some alimony thing with a lesbian couple once, Saptarshi, because someone was earning more and someone was earning less, and they left the job for someone, and we got called out for not being feminist because we tried to do the alimony thing. So if that legal thing comes up, alimony bhi aayega usme.
Yeah.
I don't know how all the things will come up. And I was actually joking and telling few of my colleagues कि divorce lawyers बन जाओ. Breakup तो बहुत आसानी से हो जाता है. You just move on. Divorce कैसे करोगे? अब बताओ तुम लोग.
Okay. Yeah.
Funny note, huh?
Yeah, Shambhavi had raised their hand. I don't know if they're still there or they have left. Shambhavi, if you are still there, can you unmute yourself and ask the question?
Yeah, I'm here. Actually, I was also just told to put it in the chat box, so I'll just ask the question. Right. So, my question was that as stakeholders, like we're obviously told in terms of policy making, especially to spread awareness and stuff like that, but what is that we can more specifically do towards this issue, especially?
Yeah, Sharif, you want to pick it up? Would you like to respond to that? Or any of the other panelists?
I think.
I did. Sorry, go ahead.
No, you tell. You bolo. तुम बोलो, फिर मैं बोलती हूँ.
There is not much that we can do, I think, other than keeping the issue alive by constantly talking about it, number one. And number two, what I said earlier, not separating it from the general issues that are there in our family laws, right? So the issues of alimony and divorce that Rituparna was talking about. I'll just post something that I'd written a while ago. It's a short article. So that there are two questions in the chat box. One is from Afreen, who asks, how do we deal with the argument that powers of the court do not extend to making new law? The union argues that by allowing same-sex marriage, the court will delve into forming legislation, which they cannot do. Okay, so this is an old argument about courts' powers, but in all legal system, courts also make law every day. So every time you're interpreting the law, you're also making new law, right? Every time you're interpreting a law and sort of laying down a rule, that's effectively a new law. It's a new rule. And in our system, there are countless examples of courts making new rules, right? Through new interpretations. Here, the problem is, it's not so in the examples that I have in mind, the new rules pertain to small issues, say procedural issues or clarifying something, right? Here you're changing the entire system. So then I don't know how whether courts will actually take up this thing, whether courts will own up this role that they have always had of making new rules, right? And there is
there's a question from Ishan, who talks about when US has been able to do kind of have the same-sex marriage from Supreme Court, why can't we make that overall change in the laws that you talk about, inheritance or the labor law or any other law?
Right. So it's possible. It's not impossible. There are legal systems which have in the last 20 years, which have sort of every legal system which has introduced same-sex marriage has had to change all their laws. They've done it. In India, so what I'm saying is we can do it, but it's not going to be a single. It'll not going to happen with a single click, right? So in all the counter arguments, they are saying that this is going to upset our existing legal system, and that's why it's not a good idea, right? So of course it can happen, but that's being used as an argument for not sort of going ahead with it.
There's another one.
I do completely agree that it's. Sorry, are we reading the?
So
okay, here it is. I do completely agree that it's highly unlikely for the SC to give us marriage equality, but from a pure academic point of view, what path should we follow to make our point heard, knowing that making the point against striking out marriage acts won't help. So the court, in the case at least, is not going to listen to private citizens. The court is only going to listen to the parties which are before the court, which are arguing before the court, right? So that's what I said earlier. I mean, even if you do not sort of play a direct role in this particular case, we can still contribute to the issue by keeping the discussion going. Right, so that's the only contribution that I can think of. I'm just posting a short article where I talk about redefining this entire question, and it kind of resonates with a lot of things that Rituparna and Sharif spoke about. So this would be useful.
There's another question by Yuvraj Singh, who asks, like former judges and various religious organizations have written their opinion to SC, to Supreme Court. Will it affect the credibility of judgment in coming days?
No, it's not going to affect either the credibility of the judgment or the content of the judgment. I mean, I am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Can you hear me? Okay, something happened on my screen. I mean, every day I think someone or the other is writing an open letter, and right. So I've just stopped taking them seriously because there's just so many of them. I don't think open letters have the kind of impact that they did 100 years ago.
Sharif, there is a question which is by Garfield, who talks about the right to chosen family. And do you see the society changing to kind of accept that in near future? It will take another 3,000, 30,000 years, because the kind of how things are the same, even if they are changing.
I'm an optimist, and but see, I believe that laws can do many things, but ecosystems, culture, uh, you know, I think people can make that difference. When Saptarshi is talking about keeping certain conversations going, I think we're also talking about visibility of certain things. And so I just believe that we need to make families accountable as much as we need to make all the other institutions accountable. The media, for example, why do they only have one narrative when it comes to queer life, by and large? Why do they have only one set of people who they keep talking to and not many more? And then they claim to be secular and diverse, etc., and all that stuff. So I think if we make some of these, then the whole idea of choice gets broadened. It gets broadened. The idea of an aspiration gets broadened. And I completely, as you would have read also, Manu, in Queer Sapien, I don't look at everything from a queer point of view. I look exactly what Saptarshi is saying is we look at a lot of general issues. I look at how my mom was treated. I was looking at several other aspects of family, and then I draw those parallels. So I think chosen family can be a reality, but if you're looking at a legal sanctity, that's a long drawn thing, and I don't believe you have to wait 30,000 years. I know that out of frustration we will say 30,000, we'll say 100 or whatever it is, but I think I'll just give you one example, Manu, of which is outside of the typical queer thing, and I think Rituparna knows this. We used to live in Gulmohar Park, and that was a journalist colony. I use was because most journalists sold their plots like they sold their soul. And, and we had moved to Gurgaon. I'm in an apartment complex. And I see the big class issue. And we moved here because my mother's brother and sister-in-law are here. And I just assumed that maybe that's important for my mom at this stage. She's 80 plus and post-COVID and all that. But how much we miss chosen family, my mom, and she uses these words, my mom and I, is just incredible. How much we're wanting to get back once our house is rebuilt in Delhi, to just have all the sort of people who used to pop in, pop out of our home like it used to be in the 90s and the 80s. We're just missing all of that, and we have that sort of family. So and the friends that I have, they also have that sort of thing, that it isn't only about blood. So I feel culturally a lot of these things can change, but it really comes down to how much we also talk and give people reassurance that this is possible. Get them the sense of belief that it is, and so that's what I don't. I think we can move courts, and I would go back to another point: chip away at various acts and sections, so that whether it's insurance, go there. You're going to other financial services, banking, go there. If it comes to hospitality and where a person assumes who's a spouse, or tell them to change that language to partner. Self-determination of who the partner is. I mean, there's so many, I think, things that can be addressed over a period of time rather than just keep waiting for bouquets.
Right.
Because the bouquets get brickbats.
Though I was adding to what Sharif said, and it also adds to the point of what can all of us do, is to actually stop the rhetoric of the quote unquote the heteronormative family. And it's very important because I recently saw a video being posted everywhere about how you cook for two people. And, you know, like when I cook for two people. When I do and it was a nice video for a couple. It's good. It's good when it's marriage equality. But I'm giving my example also because when I cook, I don't cook for two people. In my home, there are food for more people because there's an extra room, the room where I'm sitting, where people come and stay. This house has also acted as a shelter home for people to come and stay when there are crisis. When there are crisis, people come and take this shelter because we are privileged to have this space, and where people have come out openly and said that these are my families, and where they have introduced their partners. Like yesterday, one of our friends came, and the first thing he started dating someone, and he told the date first thing he said that, listen, I have a family. They are not my biological family, but my family has to accept you first, and you have to respect my chosen family. And if you don't that, if they don't like you, then hum log, we can't be dating. This is the kind of this. And when the other person who calls us family, like Amrita and me, the family, when she introduced me to us to her partner, she said, I said, डर क्यों रहते हैं? बोले नहीं, family से मिलवाना था ना. So it's not just simple things. It's just, these are very, very important things that we take care of because we don't cook for two. People just call us and say कि बहुत दिन से घर का खाना नहीं खाया है, because these are people who are violated by family members, by biological family members. बहुत दिन से घर का नहीं खाना खाया है, आप प्लीज घर का कुछ बना के रखो. They can say ये खाना ठीक नहीं बना है, and they know that I won't be offended when they say कि नमक कम है, ये कम है. This is, and just the way we take our biological family for granted, they should also take us for granted sometimes. I think that is the space that we need to create. And when we say that we want to do something, I think we should get away from the rhetoric of the heteronormative family and start talking about other kinds of diverse way of intimacy and kinship that people are living in. और ये बहुत नया नहीं है, बहुत सालों से हो रहा है. Indigenous communities have been living like this for ages. Like my father used to stay alone in our village after my mom's death. And वो अगर 5 बजे वरांडा का लाइट बंद नहीं होता था, entire village used to gather outside his house just to be sure that वो ठीक है कि नहीं है. So this is the community that I grew up in, and this is the community I think that we should build up, and not a community of two people. It is very individualist. So, and when we try and conduct these sessions, let's try and talk about a queer perspective and not just and queer, when I say Saptarshi queer, it's not just LGBT. I'm talking about queer in terms of caste, class, ethnicity, and everything, where we talk about disability, where we talk about so many other things. And that's where we talk about, then we can go to marriage equality, then we can talk about non-discrimination.
Yeah. I don't want to hold you guys here because it's already more than 7:30, over 7:30. So this is the last question, I promise. And this is about, is it possible to engage with the opposition, with the people who are opposing queerness or having a family, chosen family, or having partners? Is it possible to engage with them? Sharif, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I was just recently on that too in Hindi, and my Hindi's improved thanks to love. But Rituparna knows that, yeah. And but I was on a hardcore. I was told later on it's a right-wing channel, so there was a Muslim Maulvi and RSS guy and some couple of other people. You know, you have just so many people on a screen nowadays, so you can't. You know, it's like a video game. I feel you can, and I feel it's just how you put arguments across. You know. And I don't give up. I've lived in a very political environment as a journalist as well. And political news bureaus are very political. and they can be very, very toxic. It's not a new thing. So I don't give up in engaging with them, because I just believe that the more we disengage, the more polarized an environment becomes. Because then we're only on camps, and then we start getting into ego battles, where we focus on personalities rather than issues. And so in this, just a few days ago, the person, I know there is a resistance to not talk about religion and things like that, but the person was using the religion card. So I said, if you dismiss us, then please dismiss Shikhandi, Vishnu, Krishna, all of them together. Then I will, then we can have another discussion separately. And I said, and he carried on, and he says, he was talking about, again, queer folks adopting kids, So I just said, I'm a child of anyway of heterosexual parents, So there are many, you can build all kinds of arguments. You have to go well prepared in these sort of, you may never be prepared at the end of the day if you're on certain television channels. Because they've already decided everything, prior to that, and then they mute you, and then there's fire on the, in the front, the burning question and all that stuff. They do all those antiques, but I believe engagement is exceedingly important, because I strongly believe in a democracy, even if it seems to keep failing.
Yeah, right. And I guess when people were asking what we can do, I guess we can just talk to more of our friends or family members, because these people are like, even in our families or extended families, there exist people who would be against.
No, but Manu, I'd say what I really pick up on what Saptarshi said, and what Rituparna does also, is putting these points across and out.
Yeah.
You see, you can't break down a system which has been carrying on for God knows how many years, right? And centuries and decades, with all this belief. When it comes to belief of any kind of faith, like the faith of right and faith of left also, it's very difficult to get people to believe anything else, right? Even in a yes and no sort of scenario.
Yeah.
The gray area has no space. Even the press has always killed the third option throughout. They just put doubt, but they're somehow okay with two other options. So I believe that we have to create those narratives. We have to put those out. We need to take it to more and more people, and not just keep it within a set of friends. That's too comfortable. We have to, and particularly when we have these options, particularly when we have those privileges to do so. And I see that. I see the way, Rituparna was talking about food. I've seen very recent posts where she was talking about how she cooks, and she was just saying, for more than one person.
Yeah.
You read the comments below, and then you get into that, and you start understanding. So I think we just have to do more than that. That's not saying denying yourself monogamy or denying yourself love, but just telling people that there is more to it.
We have another question from Vids. Is it Vijay? Vids Jen? Do you want to unmute yourself and ask? They have left. Okay, so I guess we should end the meeting here. And thanks a lot, everyone, especially the panelists. आप लोग अपना समय लेकर आए, उसके लिए तहे दिल से शुक्रिया. Our audience, you guys have stayed here for so long. You have been, of course, it was a scintillating discussion. It was so interesting and informative that you guys stayed put. And हम ऐसे ही और webinars करते रहेंगे आगे भी. So please keep in touch with us on our social media channels and offline as well. We do organize offline meetups and listening circles. तो आप प्लीज ज्वाइन कीजिए, जो भी चंडीगढ़ या आसपास के एरिया से हैं या फिर किसी और शहर में भी हैं पर they want to be part of this. So
thank you for having me, and it was wonderful sharing the space with Saptarshi and Sharif.
Yeah, same here.
Same here. Thank you. And
thank you.
Yeah.